Good morning, students. Today we are going to see about the lesson Introduction to Microeconomics. In this lesson, we have to learn about a fundamental knowledge on the subject of economics and to understand its nature and scope, and also learn about the meaning of some basic concepts of economics and to observe how they are applied in the various definitions formulated on the science of economics. Let's see the introduction. A subject should have a name or title that facilitated a clear and correct understanding of its content. In a subject like economics, there are many books available with titles such as Introductory Economics, An Introduction, Basic Economics, Elements of Economics, Elementary Economics, Fundamentals of Economics, etc. But these books have the same contents, though each is intended to serve readers of a different levels of interest and capacity. And let's start a good introduction to a subject. Besides containing the meaning of its title, should have an explanation of the nature and scope of the subject. That is, whether the subject is traditional or modern, static or dynamic. The reader should be in a position to clear and classify the subject as belonging to either arts alone or to science alone or to both. The significance of all the branches of the subject should find a place in it. As they go through the introduction, the readers should be able to understand the relationship of the subject with other subjects. Never areas incorporated into the subject and the never ways to comprehending its contents or to be highlighted in the introduction. The methodologies applied in the derivation of its law or to be stated in such an introduction. Let's see the economics meaning. The term or word economics come from the ancient Greek oikonomikos. Oikos means households and noms means management, custom or law. Thus the term economics means management of households. The subject was earlier known as political economy, is renamed as economics in the late 19th century by Alfred Marshall. Let's see economic, its nature. The nature of a subject refers to its content and how and why they find a place in a subject. This nature is understood by studying the various definitions given by the notable economists or presented here. Let's see what are they. Smith's-Well definition representing the classical era, Marshall's welfare definition representing the neoclassical era, Robbins' scarcity definition representing the new age, Samuelson's growth definition representing the modern age. Economic is a science. Science is an organized branch of knowledge that analyzes cause and effect relationship between economic agents. Let's see wealth definition. Adam Smith 1723 to 1790 in his book An Inquiry into Nature and Causes of Wealth of Nation. It defines economics as a science of wealth. Ordinary language by wealth we mean money, but in economics wealth refers to those goods which satisfy human wants. But we should remember all goods which satisfy human wants are not wealth. And now let's see, he explains how nations wealth is created and increased. He considered that the individual in the society wants to promote his own gain and this process. He is guided and led by an invisible hand. He states that every man is motivated by his self-interest. This means that each person work for his own good. And now we see Smith favors the introduction of division of labor. To increase the quantum of output, severe competition in factories and society helps in bettering the product. Supply force is very active and a commodity is made available to the consumers at a lowest price. Now see the publication of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations in 1776 has been described as the effective birth of economics as a separate discipline. Now we see the criticism for Smith. Economics consists of wealth getting activities and wealth spending activities, and undue emphasis is given to material wealth. Wealth is treated to be an end in itself. This view leads him to ignore human welfare as an essential part of the economics. Smith gives his definition when religious and spiritual values are held high. Ruskin and Carlyle regarded economics as a dismal science, pig science, etc., as it teaches selfishness which is against ethics. Let's see welfare definition. Welfare definition is given by Marshall. Marshall views is that economics studies all the actions that people take in order to achieve economic welfare. In other words, man earn money to get material welfare. Now see welfare definition. Alfred Marshall, 1842 to 1924, in his book Principles of Economics, it defines economic thus political economy or economic is a study of mankind in the ordinary business of life. It examines that part of individual and social action which is most closely connected with the attainment and with the use of material requisite of well-being. Thus, it is on one side a study of wealth and is on the other and more important side a part of the study of man. And let's see the important features of Marshall definitions. Economics does not treat wealth as the be all and end all of economic activities. Man promotes primarily welfare and not wealth. The science of economics contains the concern of ordinary people who are moved by love and not merely guided or directed by the desire to get maximum monetary benefit. Economics is a social science. It studies people in the society who influence one another. Now see the criticism of welfare definition. Marshall regards only material thing. He does not consider immaterial things such as the service of the doctor, a teacher and so on. They also promote a people welfare. In the theory of wages, Marshall ignores the amount of money that goes as reward for the service of immaterial service. Marshall definition is based on the concept of welfare, but it is not clearly defined. Welfare varies from person to person, country to country, and one period to another period. Marshall clearly distinguishes between those things that are capable of promoting welfare of people and those things that are not, things like liquor that are not capable for promoting welfare but command a price, come under the purview of economics. However, welfare means happiness or comfortable living conditions of an individual or group of people. The welfare of an individual or nation is dependent not only on the stock of wealth proposed but also on political, social, and cultural activities of the nation. Let's see the scarcity definition. Lionel Robbins published a book and essay of the nature and the significance of economic science in 1932. According to him, economics is a science which studies human behavior as a relationship between ends and scarce means which have alternative uses. Now see the major features of Robbins' definition. Hence refers to human wants. Human beings have unlimited number of wants. On the other hand, resources or means that go to satisfy the unlimited human wants are limited or scarce in supply. The scarcity of a commodity is to the considered only in relation to its demand. Further, the scarce means are capable of having alternative uses. Hence, an individual grades his wants and satisfying the first is most urgent wants. Thus, economics, according to Robbins, is a science of choice. Let's see the criticism. Robbins does not make any distinction between goods conducive to human welfare and goods that are not. In the production of rice and alcoholic drink, scarce resources are used, but the production of rice promotes human welfare while that of alcoholic drinks does not. However, Robbins concludes that economics is neutral between ends. Economics deals not only with the microeconomics aspects of resources, allocation and the determination of the price of the commodity, but also with the macroeconomics aspects like how national income is generated. But Robbins reduced economics merely to theory of resource allocation. Robbins' definition does not cover the theory of economic growth and development. Let's see the growth definition. Paul Samuelson defines economics as the study of how men and society choose, with or without the use of money, to employ scarce productive resources which could have alternative uses, to produce various commodities over time and distribute them for consumption now and in the future among various people and groups of society. The greatest merit of Samuelson defines is that is recognize the dynamic change taking place both in the means, resources and hence wants. With the passage of time, the progress or changes occurring from time to time also affects the whole concepts of the related development in the economic world. Let's see the important features of the definition. Samuelson states that the means are scarce in relation to unlimited ends and that such means could be put to alternative use. Samuelson makes his definition dynamic by including the elements of time in it. Therefore, his definition covers the theory of economic growth. Samuelson defines is applicable also in a barter economic where money is not used. His definition covers various aspects like production, distribution and consumption. Samuelson treats economics as a social science, whereas Robbins regards it as science of individual behavior. Of all the definitions discussed above, the growth definition stated by Samuelson appears to be the most satisfactory. So the progress or changes occurring from time to time also affect the whole concept of the related development in the economic world. Let's see the scope of economics. Its subject matter, economics is an art and a science, positive science and normative science. The scope of economics is a broad subject and encompasses not only its subject matter but also various other things such as its scientific nature, its ability to pass value judgments and to suggest solutions to practical problems. Scope of economics. The scope of the subject of economics refers to on the subject matter of economics. It's through light on whether it is an art or a science, and if science, whether it is a positive science or normative science. And now see economics, its subject matter. It is concerned with wants, effort, production, distribution, and exchange and consumption. In other words, it deals with a decision regarding the commodity and services to be produced in the economy, how to produce them mostly economically, and how to provide for the growth of the economy. Let's see the subject matter. Economics focuses on the behavior and interaction among economic agents, individuals, and groups belonging to an economic system. It deals with the activities such as the consumption and the production of goods and services, and the distribution of income among the factors of production. The activities of the rational human beings in the ordinary business of life under the exciting social, legal, and institutional arrangement, and included in the science of the economics. The abnormal persons and the socially unacceptable and unethical activity are excluded. And let's see the second one is economic studies, that way in which people use available resources to satisfy their multiplicity of wants. And let's see another one is scarcity is a problem indicating the gap between what people want and what they are able to get. This scarcity can be eliminated either by limiting the human wants or by increasing the supply of the goods that satisfy the human wants. The method of getting more is resorted to rather than the method of wanting less. Economics is concerned with the activities of human being only. Human beings are related to one another, and the actions of one member affects those of the other members in the society. Hence, economics is called a human science or social science. The activities of rational and normal human beings are the subject matter of economics. Let's see the last point of the subject matter. All human activities related to wealth constitute the subject matter of economics. Thus, human activity not related to wealth, non-economic activities are not treated in economics. For example, playing cricket for pleasure, mother's child care. It is customary to clarify whether economics is an art or a science, and if it is a science, to observe its specific features. And these are all the specific features of economics and its subject matters. And now we see the economics is an art and a science. Economics as an art. Economics as an art. Art is a branch of study that deals with expressing or applying the creative skills and imagination of a human to perform a certain activity. Art is the practical application of knowledge for achieving practical goals. Economics provide guidance to the solution to all the economic problems. A.C. Piggott, Alfred Marshall, and other regarded economics as an art. Economics also requires human imagination for the practical application of scientific laws, principles, and theories to perform a particular activities. Economics as a science. Economics is a systematic study of knowledge. All its relevant facts are collected, classified, and analyzed with its scale of measurement. Using these facts, science develops. Let's see the economics as a science. Correlation between cause and effect. scientific laws derived as tested through experiments, and future prediction are made. These laws are universally applicable and accepted. Economists like Robbins, Jordan, and Robertson argue that economics is a science like physics, chemistry, etc. Since it has several similar characteristics, economics examines the relationship between the causes and the effect of the problems. Hence, it is rightly considered as both an art and a science. In fact, art and science are complementary to each other. It is a study of relationship between cause and effect, and it is capable of measurable on based on its fact. Now we see economics, positive science and normative science. Positive science deals with what is it means. It analyzes a problem on the basis of facts and examines its causes. For example, at the time of a price increase, its causes are analyzed. On the other hand, normative science responds to a question like what ought to be. Here the conclusions and the results are not based on facts, but on different considerations belonging to social, cultural, political, religious realms. They are basically subjective in nature. Let's see positive science. Positive science is concerned with how and why, and normative science with what ought to be. The distinction between the two can be explained. An increase in the rate of interest under positive science could be looked into as to why and how can it be reduced, whereas under normative science it could be seen as to whether it is good or bad. Let's see, there are three statements about each type are given below. First one is positive economics. An increase in money supply implies a price rise in an economy as the irrigation facilities and application of chemical fertilizer expand. The production of food grains increases. An increase in the birth rate and a decrease in the death rate reflect the rate of growth of population. Let's see normative economics. Inflation is better than deflation. More production of luxury goods is not good for a less developed country. Inequalities in the distribution of wealth and incomes should be reduced. Let's see basic concepts in economics. At the most basic levels, economics attempts to explain how and why we make the purchasing choice we do. Let's see what are all these. Now we see basic concepts in economics. Like other science, economics also has concept to explain its theories. A complete and clear grasp of their meaning is necessary when the theories associated with them are studied. Only primarily acquaintance in now attempt here. Now we see goods and services. Both goods and services satisfy human wants. In economics, the term goods implies the term service also, unless specified otherwise. Goods also called product, commodities, things, etc. As material things, they are intangible, have physical dimensions, that is, their physical attributes can be preserved over time, exist independently of their owner, or owned by some persons, or transferable, having value in exchange. Now see kinds of goods and services. Free and economic goods. Free goods are available in nature and in abundance. Man does not need to incur any expenditure to own or use them. For example, air and sunshine. Water was also an example in the past, but at present it has exchange value. So it is not a free good. Let's see. Milton Friedman, a Nobel laureate, popularized his sayings. There is no such thing as a free lunch. He means that it is impossible to get something for nothing. Even those offered free always cost a person or the society as a whole. Its cost, however, is hidden. It is an externality. Someone can benefit from an externality or from a public good, but someone else has to pay the cost of producing the benefits. In economics, it refers to opportunity cost. Let's see public versus private goods. Public goods. A good available to everyone to consume regardless of who pays and who does not. Spillover benefit, non rival in consumption and non excludable. For example, national defense and law enforcement. See private goods. A good consumed by a single person or household. This is a private goods. No spillover benefit, rival in consumption and excludable. For example, food and drink. On the other hand, economic goods are not available in plenty. There are a scarce in supply. Man has to spend money to own or use them. Consumer goods and capital goods. Consumer goods directly satisfy human wants, that is TV, furniture, automobiles, etc. Let's see capital goods. Capital goods are also called producer goods. Do not directly satisfy the consumer wants. They help to produce consumer goods. For example, machines do not directly satisfy the consumers, but in factory the manufacturers need them. Now we see what is perishable goods and durable goods. Perishable goods are short-lived. Their lifespan is limited. For example, fish, fruits, flowers, etc. do not have a long life. And durable goods and semi-durable goods have a little longer lifetime than the perishable goods. For example, a table, a chair, etc. Let's see services. There are 4 types of services. Let's see one by one. Along with goods and services are produced and consumed, they have generally possessed these followings. Intangible. First one is intangible. Intangible things are not physical objects but exist in connection to other things. For example, brand image, goodwill, etc. But today, the intangible things are converted and stored into tangible items such as recording a music piece into a pen drive. They are marketed as a good. Let's see, the second one is heterogeneous. Services vary across regions and cultural backgrounds. They can be grouped on the basis of quality standards. A single type of service yield multiple experience, for example, music, consulting physicians, etc. And third one is inseparable from their makers. Services are inextricably connected to their makers. For example, labor and laborer are inseparable. And the last one is perishable. I already told you what is perishable. Perishable goods are short-lived. The run span of lifetime is limited. Services cannot be stored as inventories like assets. For example, it is useless to possess a ticket for a cricket match. Once the match is over, it cannot be stored and it has no value in exchange. Let's see utility. Utility means usefulness. In economics, utility is the one satisfying power of a commodity or a service. It is in the goods and services for an individual consumer at a particular time and at a particular place. Now we see what are the characteristics of utility. There are 7 characteristics. Let's see one by one. Utility is psychological. It depends on the consumer mental attitude. For example, a vegetarian derives no utility from mutton. And the second one is utility is not equivalent to usefulness. For example, a smoker derives utility from a cigarette, but his health gets affects. And the third one is utility is not the same as pleasure. A sick person derives utility from taking a medicine, but definitely it is not providing pleasure. Now we see a fourth characteristics of utility. Utility is a personal and relative. An individual obtains varied utility from one and the same good in different situations and places. Utility is a function of the intensity of human wants. An individual consumer faces a tendency of diminishing utility. And the sixth one is utility is a subjective concept. It cannot be measured objectively and it cannot be measured numerically also. And let me see a last characteristics of utility. Utility has no ethical or moral significance. For example, a cook derives utility from a knife using which he cuts some vegetables, and a killer wants to stab his enemy by the knife. In economics, a commodity as utility, it is a satisfy a human wants. Now we see types of utility. There are 6 types of utility here. Let's see one by one. First one is form utility. Let's see what are they. An individual consumer obtains utility from a good or service only when it is available in a particular form. Raw materials in their original form may not possess utility for a consumer, but in their changed form as they become finished product, they provide utility to him. For example, cotton as a raw material may not possess utility for a consumer, but has to get a new form as a cloth. It yields the consumer utility. And another one is time utility. A sick man derives time utility from blood not at the time of its donation but only at the operation time, that is when it is used. And the third one is place utility. A student derives place utility from a book not at the place at its publications but only at the place of his education, that is a place utility. And the fourth one is service utility. An individual consumer derives service utility from a service made available at the time when he most needs it. For example, clients obtain service utility from their lawyers, patients derive service utility from the doctors, and so on. And the fifth one is position utility. When a student buy a book or dictionary from a bookseller, then only it gives utility. And let's see a last one, knowledge utility. It is a utility derived by having knowledge of a particular thing. Advertisement serves as a source of information on an objective. And now see measurability of utility. Wants of a person are satisfied by the act of consumption. The consumer derives utility measured in terms of utils. An util, it is a unit of measurement of utility. An individual pays a price for the unit of the good equal to the utility derived, and Marshall states that utility can be measured indirectly using the measuring rod of money. Let's see what is price. Price is a value of good expressed in terms of money. Price is a good is fixed by the forces of demand for supply of a goods. Price determines what goods are not to be produced and in what quantities. It also decides how the goods are to be produced. Now we see what is market. Generally, market means a place where commodities are bought and sold, but in economics, it represents where buyer and sellers enter into an exchange of goods and service over a price. Now see cost. Cost refers to the expenses incurred to produce or acquire in given quantum of a good. Quantum means measure of a goods. It is together with a revenue it determines the profit gained or the loss incurred by a firm. Now we see what is revenue. Revenue is income obtained from the sale of goods and service. Total revenue, that is represent the money obtained from the sale of all the units of a goods. The TR, that is total revenue, equal to P into Q. P means price and Q is total quantity. Where TR is total revenue, P is the price per unit of a goods and Q is the total quantity of the goods sold. Let's see equilibrium diagram. First one is stable equilibrium. Professor Stigler states that equilibrium is a position from which there is no net tendency to move. Its absence refers to a disequilibrium. Consumer equilibrium occurs when he gets maximum satisfaction. The equilibrium of the producer occurs when he gets maximum profit. A resource is in equilibrium when it gets fully employed and gets its maximum payment. The status equilibrium is based on given and a constant price, quantities, income, technology, pollution, etc. And another one is particular equilibrium and general equilibrium. An equilibrium, when it pertains to a single variable, may be called particular equilibrium. An equilibrium, on the other hand, when it relates to numerous variables or even the economy as a whole, may be called general equilibrium. And another one is income. Income represents the amount of monetary or other returns, either earned or unearned, small or big, occurring over a period of time to an economic unit. A nominal income refers to income expressed in terms of money. It is termed as a money income. Real income is the amount of goods that can be purchased with money as income. It is the purchasing power of income which is based on the rate of inflation. And next we will see economics, its method, facts, theory and laws. Methods of economics. First one is deduction and induction. Like any other science, economics also have its law or generalized. These laws govern the activities in the various divisions of economics such as consumption, production, exchange and distribution. The logical purpose, that is a logical process of arriving at a law or generalization in a science, is called its method. Let's see a method of economics. Methods of economic analysis, there are two categories. First one is inductive method and second one is deductive method. Economics uses two methods, deduction and induction. Deductive method of economic analysis. It is also named as analytical or abstract method. It consists in deriving conclusions from general truths. It takes few general principles and applies them to draw conclusions. The classical and neoclassical school of economists, notably Ricardo, Senior, J.S. Mill, Malthus, Marshall, applied the deductive method in their economic investigations. Let's see, give us some steps of deductive method. Let's see what are they. The analyst must have a clear and precise idea of the problem to be inquired into. And the second step is the analyst clearly define the technical terms used in an analysis. Further assumptions of the theory are to be precious. And the third one is deduce hypothesis from the assumption taken. And the last one is hypothesis should be verified through direct observation of events in the real world and through statistical method. For example, there exists an inversion relationship between price and quantity demand of goods. Let's see inductive method of economic analysis. Inductive method, that is also called empirical method, is adopted by the historical school of economists. It involves the process of reasoning from particular facts to get principle. Economics generalized are derived in this method on the basis of there are three methods. First one is experimentation, observation and statistical method. They are given some steps. First one is data are collected about a certain economic phenomenon. These are systematically arranged and the general conclusions are drawn from them. And the second one is by observing the data, conclusions are easily drawn. And the third one is generalization of the data and then hypothesis formulation. And the last one is verification of the hypothesis. Let's see this chart. This is clear about what about inductive method and deductive method. Let's see what is Engel's law. According to Engel's law, the proportionate of total expenditure incurred on food items decline as total expenditure, which is proxy for income, goes on increasing. Economists today are of the view that both these methods are complementary. Alfred Marshall has rightly remarked, inductive and deductive method are both needed for scientific thought as a right and left foot are both needed for walk. Let's see economic facts and theories. Using the method, the economist observe facts such as changes in the price of a commodity. Similarly, the quantity demanded of that commodity also varies. And he observes these movements and comes up with a theory that these two movements are inversely related. That is, when the price increases, the quantity demanded of that commodity decreases, and vice versa. Thus, he formulated his theory of demand. He tests his theory by collecting further facts, and when his theory stands the test of time and obtains universal acceptance, the theory is raised to the status of law. Now we see nature of economic laws. A law expressed a causal relationship between two or more than two phenomena. Marshall states that the economic laws are statement of tendencies, and those social laws which related to those branches of conduct in which the strength of the motives chiefly concerned can be measured by money price. In natural sciences, a definite result is expected to follow from a particular cause. In economic science, the law function with the cause and effect, the consequence predicted by the data necessarily and invariably follow. However, economic laws are not as precious and certain as a law in the physical sciences. Marshall holds the opinion that he are no laws of economics which can be compared for a precision with the law of gravitation. Now we see what are the importance of microeconomics. To understand the operation of an economy, to provide tools for economic policies, to examine the condition of economic welfare, efficient utilization of resources, useful in international trade, useful in decision making, optimal resources allocation, basis for prediction and price determination. These are all the importance of microeconomics. A physical scientist carrying out controlled experiments in his laboratory can test the scientific laws very easily by changing the conditions obtaining there. Changes in economic science cannot be brought about easily. As a result, prediction regarding human behavior is likely to go wrong. There are expectations to the law of demand, thus economics law are not inviolable. as unpredictability is invariably associated with the economic laws. Marshall compares them to the laws of tides, just as it cannot be predicted and said with certainty that a high tide could follow a low tide. Unpredictability prevails in economics. Human behavior is volatile. Economic laws are not assertive, but there are indicative. The law of demand, that is, for example, states that other thing remaining the same. The quantity demanded of a commodity increases as its price decreases, and vice versa. Use of the assumption other things remaining the same in economics make the economics law hypothetical. It might be argued that the law in other science can also be called hypothetical. It should be admitted, however, that in the case of economics, the hypothetical elements in its laws are a little less pronounced than in the law of physical sciences. But since money is used as a measuring rod, laws in economics are more exact, precious, and accurate than the other social sciences. As the value of the measuring rod money is not constant, there is always an hypothetical element surrounding the laws of economics. Some economic law are simple. For example, saving is a function of income. Another example of TRISM is human wants are unlimited. Let's see economics and its subdivisions. Economics has been divided into some branches. First one is consumption, production, exchange, and distribution. Let's see what is consumption. Human wants coming under consumption is the starting point of economic activity. In this section, the characteristics of human wants based on the behavior of the consumer, the diminishing marginal utility, and the consumer surplus are dealt with. And the second one is production. Production is the process of transformation of input into output. This division covers the characteristics and role of factor of production, namely land, labor, capital, and organization, and also the relationship between input and output. Let's see what is exchange. Exchange is concerned with the price determination in different market forms. This division covers trade and commerce. Consumption is possible only if the produced commodity is placed in the hands of the consumer. And the last one is distribution. Production is the result of the coordination of factors of production. Since a commodity is produced with the effort of land, labor, capital, and organization, the produced wealth has to be distributed among the cooperating factors. The reward for a factor of production is studied in the division under rent, wage, interest, and profit. Distribution studied about the pricing of factors of production. Now we see economics, its type. Economics is a rapidly growing subject and its horizon has been expanding up. The basic thrust of a subject is that there should be efficient allocation of the available scarce resources to obtain maximum welfare to the people on a sustainable basis. Given below are some of the major branches of the subject where such efficient resources allocation is made. First one is microeconomics. Microeconomics is the study of the economic action of individual units, says household, firm, and industries. It studies how business firm operates and under different market conditions and how the combination action by the buyers and sellers determine prices. Microeconomics covers a value theory, that is a product price and factors price theory of economic welfare. Let's see the types. Economics can be studied under the two broad category. First one is macroeconomics and another one is microeconomics. Let's see the term microeconomics and macroeconomics were first used in economics by Norwegian economist Ragnhild Fraser in 1933. After Professor Fresh, the term earned popularity when J.M. Keynes clearly distinguished between the terms through his book entitled General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, published in 1936. See what is macroeconomics. Macroeconomics is the observe of microeconomics is concerned with the economic as a whole. It is the study of aggregates such as national output, inflation, employment and taxes. The general theory of employment and interest and money, published by Keynes, in the basic of modern macroeconomics. Now let's see the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. It is a branch of economics which deals with the economic decision making of individual economic agents such as the producer, the consumer, etc. Macroeconomics. It is that branch of economics which deals with the aggregate and average of the entire economy. For example, aggregate output, national income, aggregate saving and investment, etc. It takes into account a small component of the whole economy. It takes into consideration the economy of the country as a whole. It deals with the process of price determination in case of individual product and the factors of production. It deals with the general price level in any economy. It is known as price theory. It is known as the income theory. It is concerned with the optimization goals of individual consumer and producer. It is concerned with the optimization of the growth process of the entire economy. Now we see developmental economic. A development economics deals with the future of development nation, obstacles for development economic and non-economic factors. The countries have been classified into developed, developing and underdeveloped on the criteria of per capita income, human development index and happiness index. The development economics deal with the future of development nation, that is obstacle for development economic and non-economic factor influencing develop various growth models and strategies. And another one is public economics. Public finance is concerned with the income or revenue raising and expenditure incurred activity of the public authority and with the adjustment of one with the other. The scope of public finance cover public expenditure, public revenue, public debt and financial administration. And another one is international economy. In the modern world, no country can grow in isolation. Every country is having link with the other country through foreign capital investment, foreign direct investment and international trade. See health economic and environmental economic. Health economics is an area of applied economics. It covers health indicators, preventive and curative measures, medical research and education, rural health mission, drug price control, neonatal care, and maternity and child health budgetary allocation for health, etc. And the last one is environmental economic. Depletion of natural resources, stock and pollution result from rapid economic development. Hence the need for the study of environmental economics, which analyzes the interrelationship between economic and environment. Environmental economics is a study of interdisciplinary tools for the problem of ecological economy and environment. And that is environmental economics, which analyze the inner relationship between economy and environment. And let's see basic economic problem. Human wants are unlimited, but resources are scarce. If resources are abundant and wants are so few, then there could be no economic problem, but this situation can never exist. Resources are always scarce and our wants are numerous. Hence, in every society, certain choices have to be made. There are three basic economics questions. Every society must answer three basic economic questions because of scarcity. That is, what will be produced, how will it be produced, how will get what is produced. And the society answers these questions differently, leading to a variety of economic systems. Let's we see what are the answers. What and how much to produce. Every society must decide on what goods it will produce or and how much of they it will produce. In this process, the crucial decision include whether to produce more of food, clothing and housing, or to have more luxury goods, whether to have more agriculture goods or to have industrial goods and services, whether to use more resources in education and health or to use more resources in military service, whether to have more consumption goods or to have investment goods, and to spend more on basic education or higher education. Let's see the economic problem. The first one is how to produce. Every society has to decide whether it will use labor intensive technology on capital intensive technology. That is, whether to use more labor and less more machines and vice versa. And another one is for whom to produce. Every society must also decide how its produce be distributed among the different sections of the society. It must also decide who get more and who get less. It should also decide whether or not a minimum amount of consumption be ensured for everyone in the society. Let's continue the for whom to produce. It is due to the scarcity of resources, a society faces the compulsion of making choice among alternatives. It faces the problem of allocating the scarce resources to the production of different possible goods and services, and of distributing the produced goods and services among individuals within the economy. Now we see production possibility curve. The problem of choice between relatively scarce commodity due to limited productive resources within the society can be illustrated with the help of a geometric device. It is known as production possibility curve. Production possibility curve, that is, shows a menu of choice along which a society can choose to substitute one good for another goods. That is, assuming a given state of the technology and given total resources. Now we see the assumption of production possibility curve. The explanation and analysis of production possibility curve is based upon certain assumption. This is some of them are following. The time period does not change, it remains the same throughout the curve. And second one is techniques of production are fixed. There is full employment in the economy. Only two goods can be produced from the given resources. And another one is resources of production are fully mobile. And the factors of production are given in quantity and quality. And the last one is the law of diminishing returns operates in production. So the every production possibility curve is based upon this assumption. If some of these assumption changes or neglected, then it affects the nature of production possibility curve. And the schedule suggested that if all resources are thrown into the production of food, a maximum of 500 tons of food can be produced. Given the excess technology, if on the other hand, all resources are instead used for producing cars, that is 25 cars can be produced. In between these two extreme possibility exist. If we are willing to give up some food, we can have some cars. To draw this curve, we can take the help of production possibility schedule. So look at the diagram. We can obtain the production possibility curve by drawing production possibilities schedule graphically. The quantity of food is shown on x-axis and the number of cars is shown on the y-axis. The different 6 production possibility are being shown as a point P1, P2, P3, P4, P5 and P6. Now we see fruit production. If we assume that innumerable production possibility exists between any two production possibility schedule, we get the production possibility curve P1 to P6. This shown the locus of point of the different possibility of production of two commodities which a firm or an economy can produce with the help of given resources and the techniques of the production. And points outside the production possibility are unattainable as society resources of production are not sufficient to give output beyond the curve. P is a point lying inside the curve like P1 are attainable by the society, but at these point resources production are not fully employed. And let's see the example of food production. If society is producing at point P7, then it can increase the production of food keeping the no number of cars constants, or it can increase the production of cars keeping the food grain output constant, or it can increase the output of both the goods simultaneously. Let's see the shift of production possibility curve. The production possibility curve shift upwards or downwards due to the change in the supply of productive resources and the change in the state of technology. The production capacity of an economy grows over time through increase in resources supply and improvement of technology. This enables production possibility curve to shift upward from AE to A1 and E1 as shown in the figure below. This outward shift of the production possibility curve is a basic feature of economic growth. And now we see the uses of production possibility curve. Through the device of production possibility curve can be used for many analytical purposes. We shall discuss below some of its popular uses. Let's see the first one, the problem of choice. The problem of choice arises because of the given limited resources and unlimited wants may relate to the location of resources between the goods for the higher income group and the lower income group, and the goods for the defense and the civilians. Since production possibility curve is the locus of the combination of the goods, the problem of choice will not arise when we choose any point on production possibility curve. Let's see the second uses of production possibility curve is the notion of scarcity. We can explain the notion of scarcity with the help of production possibility curve. We know that every society possesses only a specific amount of resources which can produce only limited amount of output even with the help of best technology. So the economic scarcity of best fact of life. The production possibility curve reflects the constraints imposed by the element of economic scarcity. And last one is solution of central problems. The central problems of an economy can be explained with the help of production possibility curve. The solution of the problem of what to produce involves the decision regarding the choice of a location on the production possibility curves. A production combines represented by any point inside the production possibility curve indicates that the economy is using inefficient methods of production and inefficient combination of resources. These are the uses of production possibility curve. And the last one is conclusion. This chapter has given a broad overview of economics. Moreover, the present certain common characteristics of economics definitions of wealth, welfare, scarcity, and growth. Three essential questions on economy must solve: what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, and also look at division of economics and some other distinction between micro and macroeconomics. It has to introduce some basic concept frequently appearing throughout the lessons, and it is also it both importance the study of economics in an intellectually fascinating adventure, highly relevant, and it's affect people's life, and every now and then after learning lesson, think in economic activity in and around you. Perhaps in this way learning of economics makes to think like an economist. Thank you, students.